Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign YouTube channel. Today, in a series of our new regular interviews, we're talking to our campaign secretary and also a well-known writer and campaigner on a range of Latin American issues, Dr. Francisco Dominguez. And the topic of our discussion will be the economic recovery in Venezuela and how this relates to the ongoing issue of sanctions and other related issues. So first of all, Francisco, there's a lot of coverage in the mainstream media and beyond about possible economic recovery in Venezuela for the first time in some time. What do you attribute this to, and what's the latest situation regarding Venezuela's economy?
Well, I think the first one is the ability of the government and the PSUV, the Chavista leadership, to be able to galvanize the population to resist. Without that level of resistance, which is extraordinarily amazing, I don't want to exaggerate the point, but there is no question that without that support of the population, it wouldn't have been able to resist. So that's the political ingredient number one on the success towards recovery. Number two was the taking of several measures internally, domestically. And I think the one that is salient is the ability of the government to increase agricultural produce or production. By now, Venezuela produces 80% of the food that it consumes. It moved from a position where it was able to produce only 20% 3-4 years ago. So that gives the country food self-sufficiency, which is an extraordinary good position to have. And number three, was able to link up with all sort of players in the new emerging multipolar world, through which it did all sort of business deals, all sort of arrangements. And the government of President Maduro was smart enough to be able to strike very clever deals in order to ensure that the economy not only sustain itself, did not collapse, but also, created conditions for the recovery. And all the indications now are that Venezuelan's economy is undergoing what people call a renaissance.
And well, obviously that's good news for us and good news for campaigners, but most of all good news for people in Venezuela. But something that has been widely documented in recent years is how harsh the US sanctions on Venezuela have become, which have been followed by the UK and other governments, including some in Europe. But there has been some speculation in the media that these sanctions could be further eased in the next period. What do you think are the possibilities of the US sanctions being eased? And also, what strategies Venezuela currently using and likely to continue to have to use to circumvent these damaging sanctions?
Yeah, the sanctions were extremely nasty. They were, I would say, all-comprehensive. They covered absolutely every possible aspect of economic activity of Venezuela internationally, as well as domestically. Let's remember that the United States made strenuous efforts to try to prevent Venezuela from purchasing food, elsewhere. And the United States sent its agents to persecute those of the people, including, diplomat Alex Saab, that was actually doing exactly this, to bring medicine and to bring food to his country as a part of his diplomatic mission. And now he is in prison. So the United States was even prepared to go as far as to break up, to bankrupt a Mexican company that was selling food to Venezuela. These comprehensive set of sanctions, including oil, gold, coltan, minerals, any manner of international transactions. The Venezuelan economy was almost totally isolated. Maduro recently in an interview revealed, I think something that we knew already, that from 2018, for about 14 months, the Venezuelan economy was not able to export one single barrel of oil. Imagine an economy that has been over-specialized for more than 100 years to just export and live off oil, of the oil revenue, suddenly finds itself with nothing that is coming in. And no wonder the representatives of the government were saying that, whereas in 2018, the government was receiving, a substantial amount of resources, by 2 years later, the Venezuelan economy was received as close 99% of that. So it was really, really comprehensive. Venezuela was able to resist, and as a consequence of various other international developments that people are aware of, the United States began to very gently lift a little bit. I wouldn't say lift the sanctions, alleviate some of the sanctions in order to allow the Venezuelan government, well, let me put it more precisely, to allow some multinational companies that deal with oil to be able to extract and produce oil so that Venezuela can sell that oil to the European market. The reason being the United States doesn't want the Europeans to actually be suffocated by the various pressures that they're under right now. So this is a recognition on the one hand that Venezuela is a good provider and is a solid, reliable provider of whatever it is, whatever arrangement the United States makes with it. I don't think the United States politically, even if some people in the political establishment of the United States may wish to lift the sanctions, politically they're trapped because of the Miami lobby, because of Marco Rubio, because of the extreme right, because of the pressure of Trump, because of the Republican Party, because of the extreme and right wing within the Democratic Party, and so on. The establishment is so full of these characters that it makes it very difficult. So the only solution for Venezuela is, number one, to deepen the links, the economic links, and all sort of other links, technological, markets, and so on, that it has with Asia, essentially, mainly China, but also Russia, including South Korea, Turkey, and so on. One can be surprised that, for example, in the last period, the non-oil export of Venezuela have increased by 76%. So clearly this is working, so that's the line. And in the meantime, I don't have the information, and if I did have it, I wouldn't reveal it. The Venezuelan government will continue to circumvent the UN sanctions by, being allowed to trade peacefully with any country that it wishes so, especially since this is the decision of a sovereign nation that's demonstrated that it's not only sovereign, but it's fiercely sovereign.
I like the description you said about sort of alleviating elements of the sanctions rather than lifting them or easing them, which kind of makes it sound a bit like a favor, whilst when of course the sanctions are actually illegal. Obviously we're based as a campaign here in Britain, and one of the governments which has gone along with the hostility of the US administration previously to Venezuela is the UK government. Is that still the current situation? And why do you think they have had this hostile attitude?
They had a plan, the UK government, I'm talking about this government. They had a plan which was revealed by the investigative journalist of the Canary, when they showed that the UK government, the Foreign Office, had a plan of setting up a special reconstruction unit that was going to be part of the Foreign Office, reconstruction unit of Venezuela, where the UK government, UK companies were going to actually get all the deals in oil, infrastructure replacement, infrastructure contracts, including taking charge as much as possible of the external debt of Venezuela. So it was an all-comprehensive package. Part and parcel of this was, I think this coincided, I don't want to say more than that, but this coincided with the mercenary attack organized from Colombia by, this guy Woodrow, which is not the same as Guaido, although was ordered by Guaido, to go into Venezuela with an armed detachment, to go all the way to the presidential palace, assassinate President Maduro in a contract that was going to last for something like 500 days, when the task was to actually clean out the country of Chavismo. So you can imagine what that meant. So there is a sort of correlation between the two things. So given that the UK ministers, some of the UK ministers expected the Venezuelan government to be overthrown, then they were ready for it. And part and parcel of this is the legal cover, which is not more than a fig leaf, to continue to recognize Mr. Guaido, not only as the interim president of Venezuela, which is a joke by now, but also they continue to recognize Mr. Guaido as the president of the National Assembly, whose mandate ended in 2020. This is completely ridiculous. And the only reason they do that is because the court made this sort of clear to them that this was not a legal issue, it was a political decision. So for as long as the UK government continues to recognize Guaido, then for that long they're able to retain 31 tons of gold. So that's the line of the UK government. And on top of that, there is the fact that the UK government is a sort of appendix of foreign policy of the United States. And when it comes to Venezuela, when it comes to just about every other thing, the UK government is a sort of willing partner and associate of any adventure that the United States intervenes into. So you can imagine the foreign office, the foreign policy establishment of the United States is really at work, putting pressure absolutely everywhere to anybody. And the UK is more susceptible to that pressure than anybody else. So therefore, the UK government is unlikely to change their position, but it makes a mockery of the whole thing, because not only the European Union has changed their mind and dropped Mr. Guaido's recognition, and they recognize not only the jury, but also, not only the factor, but also the jury, the government of President Maduro. The UK government has an ambassador and an embassy in Caracas, which they continue to, the ambassador actually has presented their credentials to President Maduro in a public televised ceremony. So it seems to me that all of these amounts to the necessity to continue campaigning very hard for the UK government to drop this nonsense, to stop organizing aggression against the people of Venezuela, and to normalize relations with the Maduro government, as just about everybody else has done it.
Yes, and that message about normalization, and of course, particularly giving back the gold that's held in the Bank of England, is very important for everyone to take on board in terms of campaigning in the Labour parties, trade unions, and so forth. Is there anything else you'd like to add around the current situation in Venezuela and indeed Latin America?
Yeah, I mean, the recovery of Venezuela is taking place under auspicious circumstances politically in Latin America. I don't want to say that, this is the same as the pink tide coming back, but there are very strong elements of that. We have had very good, strong left-wing results in many Latin American countries: Mexico, Argentina, Bolivia, Peru, Honduras, Chile. The performance of the left with Petro in Colombia is a very good indication of the way things are going, and very likely, and we all hope that this is the case, Lula is going to become president of Brazil in the coming election in October in that country. Brazil being such a giant, such a weighty component element in the region, then obviously it's going to transform the situation quite dramatically. This is already creating the conditions for the retaking of regional integration or regionally integrated economic activities. And one of the key components of this is not going to be the only one, but one of the key components is going to be the fact that Lula has already admitted publicly that he was wrong not to have supported Hugo Chavez's proposal of setting up a regional currency for the Latin American countries so that they didn't have to depend on the dollar. And you can see the summit already has indicated the level of, let me put it like this, disobedience south of the river, south of the Rio Bravo, where the Latin American nations are telling without, unequivocally to the United States, they're not prepared to be the stooges of the United States anymore. They're not the backshot anymore. And if Latin America is in a position to actually retake that regionally integrated development, there is no question about it that the better world that we started to build some time ago, started with Hugo Chavez in 1998, and certainly much earlier with the Cuban Revolution, can be resumed And once Latin America is in that position, then not only Latin America is going to have a better world, but also the whole world is going to be better off. So we have everything to gain by continuing and deepening and redoubling our support for solidarity with Venezuela and all of Latin America.